See, folks are joining and looks like we're live. Good morning, everybody. We're going to give just a minute or so more for some more folks to trickle in before David Pepper and I get into it this morning. I'm excited for this conversation. Super happy that everybody's joining us again.
Medford, Oregon, up early.
Nice. Yeah, that is. Yeah, thanks at 7 a.m. for being here. We appreciate that. All right. Well, I'm sure folks are going to continue to join us. So I will reintroduce myself. I'm Lisa Senecal, and I am here as I am on every Thursday with David Pepper. Good morning, David.
Good morning. How you doing?
I am great. Yeah. For folks who don't know David, he is the author of the Perspectives newsletter on Substack. He is the author of many books, including Saving Democracy and Laboratories of Autocracy. Check those out if you have not read them already. I was going to say, especially Saving Democracy. Yeah, I guess start with that, but understanding the laboratories of democracy, super important too, to saving democracy. So,
Right.
Wonderful books, and can't recommend them highly enough. David, your focus is consistently really on what's happening at local and state levels.
Mhm.
So can you talk to us? We need to get a little bit of an update on what's going on with the shutdown. And we know one of the primary reasons we have this right now is that the Democrats are fighting to not lose the subsidies for the Affordable Care Act. So can you talk to us some about that and how you think that's
Sure.
impacting folks and states?
Yeah, just so everyone, I think a lot of people will be up on this, but I think it's just good to review. I often find that I assume people have seen everything that we're seeing, and oftentimes a little quick explanation just make sure we're on the same page. I talked to my congressman yesterday on a Substack Live. I did a little Substack on the other day. It really is the right fight. I mean, if the Democrats were not putting the stake in the ground here, the impact on millions of Americans, Democrats, Republicans, independents, everywhere. Catastrophic may be too strong a word, but it would be
Close.
incredibly damaging consequences. With some, it would be a dramatic spike percentage-wise in their health insurance premiums, hundreds of dollars, some thousands of dollars, and some tens of thousands of dollars. And we all know that also means that millions would just opt out of being insured. And one reason premiums are going up on everybody is because once the insurers know that healthier people drop out of the system, that means the cost pool is more expensive. So the consequences are already beginning. Some of the proposed premium increases are already in the works. And I do think that one reason I think we're seeing generally not only that Republicans and Trump are losing the who's to blame for the shutdown battle, but even more importantly, that 80% of Americans agree with the position on extending the subsidies. That includes 57% of Republicans. What else is there such broad bipartisan agreement on? One poll had 56% of MAGA supporters support this. And it's not only the general concept, it's because red states, who many of which don't have Medicaid expansion, will pay the price more than anybody else. So I think that not always a matter of politics, I think is a matter of averting what would be, we're already close enough to recession. I think these added costs would be one of the tipping points, but the costs on everyone, the millions who would lose insurance, the downward spiral that would flow from there. I think it really is a really important fight. And I think in a time where we've been worried about Democrats' messaging, I think the messaging has got through, and the American people see they see the lies of all the illegal immigrant stuff that the Republicans always bring up when they're desperate. And they see that Democrats are actually fighting on something that we're already really concerned about costs. This would be a massive expense to so many households.
Yeah, and it's so the Republican argument is so disingenuous. Just reopen the government, and then sure, we're going to talk about this. Well, if they wanted to do that, they have had time. We've been listening to Donald Trump say since 2015 that he has a health care plan he's going to release in 2 weeks to replace the
Right.
ACA that's going to be so much better. And, clearly that has not happened. And and they just passed this hideous
Right.
budget bill that
Yeah.
cuts health care for
Right.
millions of people. So the idea that all of a sudden, if you reopen the government, the Republicans are going to dive in to figure out how to not have these costs increase happen, there's not even time.
Right.
And we
Yeah.
know that
They're being built into the premiums as we speak.
yeah,
Yeah.
yeah, I'm gonna get my annual renewal pretty soon,
Yeah.
and I know it's gonna happen a lot sooner than Democrats and Republicans are gonna get together and come up with a
Yeah.
new system for funding healthcare. It's insane.
And the big budget bill, whatever they call it now, the big ugly bill, they put in the tax cuts for the billionaires.
Yeah.
So they put in the whopping tax cuts, and they didn't do this. And this was their big priority. So if they didn't do it just a couple months ago, they basically voted against these extensions. The idea that they're just going to do it, trust us. I think we've seen Trump's broken promise on healthcare for years. Their continual call to repeal the ACA. They didn't fund it now while giving away tax cuts. Some of them are still saying now, this is why we got to get rid of the Affordable Care Act. They're using this as a justification. So yeah, like I said, I think this is the right fight, and I think the Democrats are going to bat for everyone's cost, and I think they're messaging it pretty well. I think people see it.
Yeah, we haven't had the Affordable Care Act for so long that people have lost their memory of what it was like before
Yeah,
the Affordable Care Act, so you can't pretend that if we have millions more uninsured people in the United States, that it doesn't really matter and it doesn't affect all of us overall. When all these folks end up showing up sicker and later into an illness at the ER that
right.
will treat them,
Right.
whether they can pay for it or not, hospitals have to keep their doors open and they have to pass those costs on to someone. And the insured people are the someones who end up
Right.
paying for those increases. So this doesn't just have an impact on red states or low income folks or I mean, my health insurance premiums are staggering and I do not have a gold or platinum plan.
Right.
The idea that they could, for some people, we're talking about them doubling. I mean, that's just impossible for
Yeah.
for most people to absorb that. Even
Yeah.
so, it's not
That's
even
why millions
deciding to opt out.
they're
You
going to
you
opt
just
out.
don't have a choice.
Yeah. Yeah.
Um, yeah, because you can't choose between your mortgage and paying your health insurance,
Right.
and that's where the costs are going to
Yeah.
increase to. So David, we're talking about how this is an issue that affects everybody, and you had an experience at what one would hope can be a non-political
Right.
event, but politics seems to be everywhere, and if
Right.
people know that you're in this world, you end up getting questions
Yeah.
wherever you go. So you were at a wedding in
Yeah.
Kentucky.
That's the problem. Oh,
Yeah, I know. It's like,
yeah.
God, I don't know. Just give me 3 hours in
Yeah.
this space with other people, and let's not do this. But somebody, because people are concerned, and
Yeah.
this gentleman obviously had very serious concerns that were hitting home for him. So
Yeah.
can you talk to us about this?
Sure. Actually, it was a wonder. So I was at a wedding, and so as most know, in Cincinnati, we're right across the river from Kentucky. I like this. I think I sound like Sarah Palin when I often say I can see Kentucky from my house. Um, and it was actually my cousin got married, and we were at this beautiful farm setting that looked back over the Ohio River towards Ohio.
Yes.
And I don't know most of the folks there. I'm in a rural part of Kentucky, and my guess is most people are probably Republican. Uh, and a couple came up to me, and they really wanted to talk politics. And of course, at first, you're kind of like, because to me, sometimes talking politics at a wedding is sort of like doing work at a wedding. My
Yeah.
instinct is that, but they really wanted to talk, and they really wanted to tell me this was a gentleman and his wife from Eastern Ohio. Um, he's a logger.
Eastern Kentucky.
I'm sorry. Yes, sorry, Eastern Kentucky, the Appalachia. He's in the logging business. And he said, "My whole county, we're all loggers. This is logging country. That's what we do. We're getting destroyed. We're just getting crushed." And it's the tariffs. It's like we are getting crushed, and everyone's talking about it, and I'm getting crushed. And then he said, by the way, he then got, I don't think this is his business, but he said, bourbon. Canada is done with American bourbon. And so the
Mm.
distilleries are getting crushed in Kentucky. And so we talked about this for maybe 20 minutes. And it was actually, I really enjoyed the conversation. I learned a lot. And I'm out all the time. And I learned so much just listening. Um, and so what the story is, as you know, I actually then posted about this gentleman's conversation, and his wife was also very animated about it in a good way. It was a very positive conversation. And I posted on Twitter like, "Hey, I was just at this wedding and this is what I heard." And I just see it here. The bashing of this person was brutal. Um, had it coming, should have known better. Um, good. I'm glad. I hope he goes bankrupt. All
Yeah,
this,
I love this for him.
yeah. I love this for him. FAFO.
Yeah.
All this stuff just piling on this guy. And I mean, honestly, I was surprised by just how much that came. And here's the news. He was a total Democrat. He was a fired up Democrat in Eastern Kentucky. And and a lot of the comments just assumed that couldn't be.
Yep.
They were almost a level of anger that like he's from Eastern Kentucky, he must have done something wrong, and good, he's feeling it. Maybe he'll figure it out. He's bankrupt. No, he and his wife, which is one reason it was such a positive conversation, were diehards. They're the ones trying to convince their neighbors to vote for Democrats, outnumbered. Um, and so the one lesson is everybody, let's not assume anything, okay? There are millions of Democrats in Ohio and Missouri and Kentucky, and they live in rural areas. As Joanna just wrote, Kentucky is a Democratic governor.
Yep.
Kentucky voted to reject universal vouchers. Kentucky voted to support abortion access. And so, one lesson, and I actually dug up Obama's old speech, that we're not reds. When we break down everything as simplistic as red states and blue states, we miss the fabric of a lot of places. We missed it. And when we start just assuming this, we make huge mistakes. And then we also start making huge decisions about how to campaign and where not to campaign. And someone just wrote, and you know how many, you know, there are as many non voters in Kentucky as there are Democrats. And so there's a whole nother group besides Republicans that probably voted for a Republican for one thing and Bashir for governor or didn't
Right.
vote at all. It's complicated. And one of the responses that I felt, I felt almost guilty for this person. And I hope he didn't see the response because he was enthusiastically a Democrat telling me this story. And it pains me if he ever were to see people saying, good, you suffered when he's actually on our side.
Right.
And so that was one response was like, everyone, I know it's a frustrating time. I get the frustration. I'm frustrated. But whether it's looking at a red state and assuming everything, or looking at red counties in blue states or red states or swing states and approving it, once we go down that path of assuming and somewhat dehumanizing, it's not only like not empathetic, it's terrible politics.
Yeah.
It's terrible politics. Obama inspired this country when he said, we are not red states and blue states. We pray for an awesome God in blue states and coach baseball there and all the things that he said. And by the way, he campaigned that way too. He won Iowa and Indiana in part because his mindset, I'm sorry, his campaign reflected that mindset. He did better in red parts of Ohio than anyone has since because he organized in those counties and he drew out people just like the person I talked to and non voters to show up. So it really, that was one conclusion. The other one was, and this is going to maybe get people a little more annoyed at me. Okay, let's say he was a Republican. Was it still the right answer to tell a man,
Right.
"Oh, thanks for telling about your misery. Good. I hope you go bankrupt." No. We what I tried to write in my Substack was, the moment someone is telling us, and here's the point. Millions of Americans in the next year are gonna figure out they've been sold a bunch of goods that were BS. They're gonna have their health costs go up. Their farms are going under. Their logging business is going under. All of this stuff. Millions of Americans are gonna see that they may have voted. Look, let's assume he wasn't Democrat, was Republican. Is the response at the moment where they see that to open? I think of it as a little bit of an open door, and I've campaigned in enough places that this is how I see it. It's a little bit of an open door. Maybe in most cases, it's not gonna open anymore. But what do? Do we try and open it further with the hope that maybe sometimes, if we do it enough, we get to 40% of red county versus 30% because we responded the right way? Or do we slam it shut? And that set of responses that I described is basically saying at the moment where we have the best opportunity to open the door to someone who hasn't been for us and he's suffering or she's suffering because of policies that the person they voted for did, opening it is the only rational solution. It's the only, and so I think it's also a sort of a red flag that what we are going to have millions of opportunities in the next year and a half to win over some of these voters, to get them to be converts to our side so they tell other people also. And I think it's on us each to figure out how do we respond in a way that is not only sort of a good response as a human, but also a politically smart response, which says, not, "Oh, I'm so glad you're going bankrupt. That's great to hear." It's, "Oh, I was worried sick about these tariffs for this reason. And we knew it was going to harm people, Republican, Democrat, and Independent. And we actually, and just like we worry about what's going to happen to your public schools in rural Kentucky, we know 70% of you voted to stop vouchers, and that's also a risk. So let's break bread on these commonalities and try and say, we've got some answers to this, as opposed to, again, slamming the door shut." So I wrote that long piece because I really do think that we're going to have millions of people suffering from all the Trump stuff. Some of them will never see it that Trump did it, and that won't be a conversation that opens the door. But others do. And when they do, like this person was saying to me, even if he'd been a Republican, the answer should have been, let's let's grab hold if we can and grow from there. I know that was a lot to say, but I thought about it a lot, and it's painful again. It pains me to think of this person if he were to see
Right.
all those nasty comments. What a wasted opportunity that would be, whatever party this person was in, to actually build some bridges and lift.
Yeah, because you're not even even though he was a Democrat, to read those responses when you want to feel good about the party that you are a part of and you wanna go out and work for that party to get people elected, seeing your fellow Democrats respond with that level of animosity and, lack of empathy, that doesn't do anything good for Democratic voters either. You want these people fired up and showing up, and, you know, this example in Kentucky is one. We know the soybean farmers are really suffering and are probably going to get a multi-billion-dollar bailout again, but that's not what they want. I mean, they need it now, but what they want is to be able to work hard and sell their product. And we do have these opportunities now to have some of these conversations. And if you come at people with Schadenfreude,
Right.
that's like, I mean, you are just slamming the door on any opportunity. You're not going to have a productive conversation with someone who you start out by humiliating.
Yeah.
Like nothing good comes of that. And it's for me, this is all part of the spectrum of dehumanization. Um, we end up at a point where we no longer see brown people in cities as humans, and ICE, can come, whether they're US citizens or not, and abuse these people. The other end of that spectrum is not caring if your fellow American is going bankrupt or is terrified that they're going to lose their home because the economy is falling apart
Yeah.
or their industry is falling apart. So, you know, I understand that there are bright lines for people, and there are subjects that we're probably not going to be able to bridge.
Right.
There's race, there are all the third rails that make the conversations hard, but where we can find that common ground, which is very often on economic issues, because
Right.
everybody is trying to get by economically and take care of themselves and their families. That's this is an easy place
Yeah.
to open up those conversations, and you don't have to convert everybody,
Right.
right? Like,
Right.
so you have a
Some
couple
yeah.
conversations and the
Some will
person
nod and
slams the
then
door in your
keep
face.
voting. Yeah.
Right, fine, fine. I was looking at before we got on this morning, Andy Bashir, in his last election, the governor there in Kentucky, won 53% of the vote. So we know Trump had 1.3 million votes and Harris had 704,000. So when you're lumping states, every person in a state as deserving your scorn because it was a state that went for Trump, you're writing off 704,000 people who voted the same way that you did. And,
Right.
it is not their fault that the entire state does not agree with them, but
Right.
you can bet that a lot of them are working to try to change minds.
Yeah, and they need our help to do that. This logger and his wife, they need us to sound good and have solutions, so when they talk to their fellow, loggers in that community, they can say, "Oh, yeah, the Democrats actually they care that this is happening. They told me that, and they have plans to solve it." One other perspective on this that I really, thought about as I wrote it is, we're and I've seen some other candidates. I think this is it James Talarico in Texas said this at some point. The powerful people who are basically the people leading the trickle down economics, so they benefit in every way, and the rest of us suffer. They need the people suffering to be disunited. They need us fighting. Us fighting about other issues that they foment is the way they can continue a divide and conquer, we get everything and the masses divide up crumb strategy. So when the logger says to, let's say, when the Republican logger says to the Democrat, "Hey, I'm suffering," and the Democrat says back, "Good," the billionaires are winning. They are the ones who need that. They foment it. It's essential to their strategy that all those paying the price of higher health premiums and, higher costs and energy costs are spiking out. If they need us to stay divided, so we don't vote out what they're doing. And so that's the other way to think about it. Why would we ever want to help further their divide and conquer strategy?
Right, and
Why
this has been
they
going
want
on forever
Yeah,
in this
that's
cut,
how they
right?
and
This
so
is why
when
you pit
yeah,
poor whites against poor blacks in the
yeah,
South. You
yeah,
make blacks having more rights be the bad guys who are the ones hurting the poor whites in the state, and that was never the case. And
correct.
it's always been that's why we see the Republicans vilifying immigrants,
Yes,
because people can't find good jobs. But the immigrants aren't taking the jobs. They're actually an important part of our economic growth, but they want us fighting
yeah,
with each other so we don't look at them picking our pockets.
yes, and that's why that moment is the moment where the Republican logger says to, let's say, a Democratic, whoever says, "I'm feeling this pain," and the Democrat says back, "Oh, I'm feeling it too." That's the moment. Like if you expand that out, that's the moment where it's like, aha, we're
Yeah.
both dealing with it. Let's figure out how to stop it. And so that's why I'm saying that, that moment is where you're like, let's go, versus pointing fingers and saying, and then going back to our corners. That's when the billionaires at the top win. It was the moment where it could have started to switch. And again, this is just one conversation, but I worry that conversation is a red flag, that we
Yeah.
don't see that moment. And I think people comment, people have to feel the pain. Like, I don't want them to, but here's the answer. They are feeling the pain. They are going to feel the pain. In the coming, if this affordable care thing isn't solved, it will be felt in intense ways. If the tariffs continue, it will be felt in intense ways. Young people are unemployed all over this country at a staggering rate right now. The pain is being felt. It is it being connected to Trump by everyone feeling it? No, but by some it is. If we're smart in the way we do it, others will see that too. But at this moment where that pain is being felt, that's the time to figure out how to not celebrate and how to not stomp on people, but how to actually say, "Yeah, we're feeling it too in our blue state. You're feeling in our red state, our red county and our blue, all of it. So let's do better." And again, will we get to 50% in a deep red county? No. Could we get to 40% like Obama did and win Ohio? Yes. And so it's about converting every single person. And again, the people who do not want that positive, potentially unifying conversation to happen are the ones who are making it hard for everybody and don't want that broader group unified against their policies.
And I'm glad we had this conversation about Kentucky because people should pay attention to Andy Beshear.
Yes.
That he is the second most popular governor in the country, a Democrat in a red state.
Yes.
He has a 67% approval rating in his state, which means a huge number of Republicans in that state support the policies that he's enacting and the fights that he's having, many of which are against the policies of Donald Trump. So it's a good indicator of some things that are happening in Kentucky and what people are coming to understand. And I watched an interview a day or so ago of he's doing interviews in New Hampshire. So keep an eye on Andy
Yes.
Beshear because there's a reason that politicians spend time in New Hampshire when
Yeah.
they're from Kentucky or, wherever outside New Hampshire they're from.
Yeah.
And, he could be a real possibility.
I was
Um,
with him last week in Cincinnati. I guarantee you, a Republican logger in that county, when they said, he'd put his arm around him. He'd say, I'm sorry that's happening. I'm fighting. I'm fighting as governor. Solve that for you. Let's help you get your exports up, or the bourbon industry. He'd put his arm around him and he'd say, I'm concerned. He wouldn't even ask what party.
yeah.
But I want to talk. I watched Andy very closely. I've known him since he was running for attorney general. Um, what I like about him is, just so people are clear, he does well, but not because he sort of ends up kind of, let's say, compromising his views on everything, and all of a sudden that gets him in the middle, so he does well. You want to see someone campaign hard on public education? Andy Beshear. His opponent was all about these private vouchers that are turning public education upside down in all across the country, in red states like Texas, Missouri, Ohio. It's this runaway freight train and lack of accountability. Um, when his opponent Daniel Cameron was running, Andy knows that in rural Kentucky, there are only the public school, the Friday night lights of that community is the public school. And a private school voucher doesn't help one person in that community. It helps into suburbia 200 miles away. And so just to be clear on how Andy Beshear did so well, he didn't pull his punches on issues like this. He literally pounded his opponent, Daniel Cameron, about how vouchers were going to crush public schools. And he said, I want to give raises to public school teachers. I don't want to defund our public schools. And he went after him. He went on offense because he understood, like I do, that in many of these rural parts of the states, there are commonalities with democratic issues that if we're not there listening, we don't even see. But he went after it. And you'll love this, Lisa, late in a debate. He did it so hard that his opponent, who initially was all about vouchers, started to walk back the position. And when asked about vouchers, he'd pivot and he'd say things like, "Oh, I have relatives who taught the public schools." Like he backed up. And late in the campaign, in debates, when schools would come up, his opponent wouldn't bring up vouchers at all. And Andy would say to the moderator, "Hey, you need to ask him his position on vouchers." He flipped the entire issue.
That's amazing.
And so what it shows you that is if you're out in these areas, and you could do that right now on property tax increases or energy bills caused by data centers or medical or healthcare cuts or these subsidies. If you're out in these places, you're not going to do well just by holding back and sort of trying to both sides everything or what's a triangulate. Andy Bashir would find issues that he knew the Republican logger would agree with him on, and he'd pound on them, and he would take no prisoners to the point that he had his Republican opponent on the run. So it's a good lesson of of not just being out there, but knowing that there are many issues where if you do it the right way, you will have commonality with the very people that are suffering under trickle-down economics, and that's how you do better in these places. And he didn't hold back. I mean, again, when his opponent would admit his position on vouchers in a statewide televised debate, Andy literally challenged the moderator to say, ask him why he's going to drain funds from our public schools for private vouchers. And so he made it a central issue. And so I think when you're really in tune with these parts of of these states, there's a lot of issues to pounce on that you can be on offense for. And that's again why he did so well.
Yeah, and the same goes for individuals, right? There are a lot of issues that you can have
Yeah,
conversations that don't need you don't need to start out talking about um, DEI. You don't have to start out talking about abortion. You can find issues where there is common ground and people are sharing that they're hurting right now. And it's those those day-to-day very visceral experiences that people are having that are creating those opportunities. And man, don't slam those doors by assuming that somebody isn't going to already agree with you
right,
on these issues. And there's an opening and there's another chance to talk. And maybe 6 months down the road, they're going to think about a conversation again, and they're gonna see the issue a little bit differently, and it's gonna make them pause the next time they
right.
go into a voting booth and ask, "Is this really what I wanna do?" Um, David, thank you so much.
Of course.
I love these conversations. Thank you, everyone, for
Yeah, I've
joining.
appreciated all the comments below. They've been very thoughtful about
Yeah,
some
yeah.
agree, but very it is a really important conversation we all have, especially now, in the next month, I think we're gonna run it up big in Virginia, and that is the beginning of the midterms. And the closer we get to those midterms, the more we have to be, I think, pretty smart and strategic about what we're doing. And let's not make any unforced errors. I think there's gonna be great opportunity. So this is a good conversation to have as we start building towards elections that in 26 could really save our democracy if we're really, really smart about how we run and how we communicate.
Yep, the opportunities keep expanding, so we need to seize every one of them and get things back on track. Thank you again, David, for being here. Thank you, everybody, for joining us. Really appreciate it so much. Support Pep Perspectives. Please support Lincoln Square, and have those complicated conversations and keep the doors open and think about being kind.
Yeah.
It doesn't hurt. It
Yeah.
actually can feel pretty good. Thank you, everybody. We will see you next week.
Take care, everybody. See ya.